All right, so we're going to talk to the first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk to the customer. Um, the very first time we talk to the customer, this is basically always called an interview. Um, there seems to be, in my opinion, a real lack of information out there in write-ups like how do you do an interview with a customer. It seems to be portrayed as just so simple as you just, oh, let's go talk to the customer. Well, that's not a bad idea to be somewhat relaxed about it. But I actually find it doesn't give enough guidance to most people. And a lot of people end up approaching these interviews in an inefficient fashion. So people will show up and they'll do an interview and they'll just have a long list of questions and they'll read the question and wait for the answer. Read the question and wait for the answer. And that's not a good method. You might as well have done an email survey with your customer. So we're really going to be looking to set up a conversation, to have it be conversational, but still to dig deep and find out what really is the problem of the customer and what it is we're going to need to do to be able to solve that problem. So I learned a basic interview process at my first job. My first job post-school, post-university. It was taught to me by Nancy Benovich Gilby. A lot of what I'm going to write here is exact quotes from the material that she gave me. So all credit goes to Nancy. She was absolutely fabulous boss, mentor. Anyway, and her initials are NABG, so you may see me abbreviate sometimes things as this with her initials. All right. So what is the basic interview process? Well, it starts with that in MSI 342 and a lot of industry, in fact, we work with what are called two pizza teams. Two pizza teams are 6 to 7 people. Okay, the idea being, well, it takes 2 pizzas to feed about 6 to 7 people. There's a good reason to size our teams like this. It's just about at the maximum that a team can function without it sort of having an explosion of communication and coordination problems. If you think about when we talk about from team member to team member, the connections, if we were to think about it that way, it goes up with the square of the size of the team. And so past this, things start to get really hard. And so what you'll see is for larger organizations, dividing up into a whole bunch of 2 pizza teams and hierarchies and other mechanisms to coordinate those teams. But what we're going to do in MSI 342 is each team will be 6 to 7 people, a 2 pizza team. So with a team of that size, the big thing is that everyone on the team meets with the customer. Now, there's several good reasons for this. And this might actually seem surprising to a lot of people. They might be much more used to the idea that, oh, we're going to have a business analyst or a systems analyst or someone we might call in Scrum the product owner. The product owner going and talking to the customer. Well, that can be necessary to have sort of a representative when we're dealing with, again, one of these massive projects where we've got lots and lots of 2 pizza teams. But here, if we've got a single team and a single customer, it makes the most sense for everyone to go forth and to meet with that customer. Why? One of the reasons is that, in fact, we need multiple people to be able to capture all of the details. It's really hard for a single person or only one or two people to be able to capture everything that's being said in an interview. But if we've got 6 to 7 people, that's a lot of parallel processing, a lot of people listening and taking notes. We can have a much more efficient manner of being able to capture what happens in the interview. Certainly, as an individual, you could record an interview, but having done that myself, I will tell you it is super tedious, and it takes a lot of time post-interview to listen to it, to take notes, to rewind, listen again, capture things. It's much better to actually take 6 to 7 people en masse and have them just all on the fly capture what the customer is saying. Yeah, another big reason about this is that it helps resolve differences of opinion on the team. Okay. And basically it promotes shared understanding, which is one of the big problems that we face as a team, is how are we all going to come to the same understanding of what the customer's problem is. If everyone is there, they all get to hear it. They all get all of the nuances of the voice of the customer. It's 100% signal. They're not losing and missing out on, or only getting like the notes from another person. Okay, so this is really a really nice benefit, and really another benefit, I won't bother to write it down, is it sort of avoids a mistrust problem. Human nature sometimes really is that you might have someone come back from an interview with a client and say, oh, the client wants this. You might be, oh, really? I can't believe that. Well, you shouldn't actually be that way. You should not mistrust your teammate, okay? You need to have trust in your teammate. But we can't deny that it's a natural human sort of problem. And so to avoid that mistrust, we can just all show up. We've all heard it, okay? And then we can argue about what it was that the client really meant when they said something, okay? Or what did they really say? Rather than having to use trust. And so that's quite handy. All right, next step. So that was step 1. Step 2 is you go and you designate a main interviewer. So this is someone whose job is to run the interview and talk, have the conversation with the client, but certainly others can talk too. So just because we have a main interviewer does not mean no one else on the team is allowed to ask a question. But it does mean that there's one person who's focused on running the meeting, running and holding the conversation with the customer. So, it helps the customer to have a single point of focus. So that's certainly true. And it's really quite nice for the customer not to be like, who am I talking to? And all constantly, they get to focus on one person and have that sort of conversation. And again, the idea is we're trying to have a conversation more so than something that feels like an interview. All right. We could call this a focused interview. So it's not just a friendly, how did you do conversation. The interviewer is going to drive the conversation with a goal in mind to determine what is the customer's problems and all sorts of things. But there's no reason that it should feel like an interrogation. The customer has not committed a crime, okay? We're here trying to get as much detail from that customer as possible. And we need this to be sort of a friendly and open environment. People don't always want to reveal everything, especially in a lot of circumstances. You're going to have to deal with clients who are basically going to need to complain about like internal processes, internal systems. They don't want to do that. So you need to have an environment that's as conducive as possible to getting all the details from someone as possible. 3, other team members. So it's everyone else. Okay. One person's the interviewer. Everyone else are note takers. Okay. And this is really serious note taking. The idea is you work very hard to capture exact quotes So when I mean quotes, we're talking about the voice of the customer. How did the person you're interviewing actually say it? What were their real words? Having these actual quotations, and so can be really useful. Often the team can refer back to, oh yeah, that's when she said this. Okay, that level of that language really does actually help the matter. And so, and by the way, developing this skill is really good. You can use it in all sorts of meetings that you have. Someone says something, you can actually quote them. And by quote, it means what they exactly said. It's not your paraphrasing of what they said. You're trying to really capture what they said. Obviously, you're not taking dictation here. You're not going to capture all the words. So that's why when you hear something that's important, though, you're like, oh, wow, that was great the way that was expressed. Capture those expressions, okay? But you're basically the note takers. Note takers are writing non-stop from beginning to end in this meeting, okay? This is not a sit back and listen job. This is an active, write the notes, take lots of notes. Okay. One thing to know in the course, when you hold your interviews, we will have you turn in your notes. And so we will see how well you actually took notes. The interviewer does not take notes. The interviewer focuses on listening and coming up with what they're going to say next to the customer. And so yes, we won't be asking the interviewer to turn in notes, and that's an important point, is the interviewer does not take notes. The interviewer is focused on the conversation and driving it in the direction that's going to produce the most information. Step 4. So basically, one of the key things you want to do with a client is always show up early. So whether it's in person or over the phone, teleconferencing, or Zoom, or whatever mechanism we're using to talk with the client, we on our end need to gather as a group early. So it's basically you gather the team, 5 minutes early. Now, if you were to be going to a client's location and meeting them there, likewise, maybe you meet in the parking lot 10 minutes earlier or so, but you don't go into the lobby until 5 minutes beforehand. It's just to note that it is really frustrating for customers to have you show up too early, because you go into the reception will announce you, call up, and that person all of a sudden is like, wow, now I have these people to deal with, but they're 15 minutes early. What's going on? No, show up 5 minutes early so that they can get the call from the receptionist and go, oh, yep, I'll hit send on that email, and they'll come down and they'll get you and they'll walk you into the meeting room, okay? But yeah, so either way, In particular, you need to gather your team early so that everyone's there on time. Um, you know, if you're using Zoom, the way you would create the meeting, you would have it set up so that people could join the meeting in advance. Be sure the whole team's there, but then use a waiting room. And so everyone's there, you're talking, and then, oh, I see the client show up in the waiting room. All right, okay, everyone ready? Stop yakking, and then admit that person into the Zoom meeting. You're really trying to strike this notion of professionalism, and you have to have huge respect for the time of the client. All right. A little sub note there is that if you want to record, you must ask permission. So if this is in person, and you're going to put on your phone and you're going to record the meeting, ask, may I record it? Be prepared that they might say no. Likewise, if they've got whiteboards or they show you other things and you would like to take a picture of it, ask them, may I take a picture of this for our records? You cannot just go around recording and photographing things without the permission of the client. Okay. Then, this is easy. You go ahead and you introduce everyone using their first names. Yes, I know if you're on Zoom or in some other thing, people will have display names and stuff. That doesn't matter. Take the time. The interviewer is going to do this, and it's going to go around and say, I'd like to introduce so-and-so, 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 and so-and-so, so-and-so. It's only going to take a few seconds, but it's a nice touch. And it is the same thing you could imagine being in person around a meeting table doing the same thing. 6. All right. Before you dive deep into this meeting, though, you need to ask if it's still a good time for the meeting. Sometimes some things happen in people's lives. They could be having a crisis at work or a personal crisis. They've got this meeting scheduled with you, but they're so concerned with other stuff that they're not really going to be able to talk nicely, talk well with you. They're going to be flustered and be thinking about other stuff. So always give your customer a way out of that meeting if that's going to be the situation. It's not going to do you any good. It's not going to do them any good. You're going to waste all your time. So is this still a good time for us to talk? That's all you have to say. And so then if it's not, then you reschedule. Okay? It's far better to reschedule than have a wasted meeting. And the client is just going to feel awful the whole time and be upset that they even bothered to have that meeting. Don't do it. How long are these meetings? You should budget 30 to 45 minutes. Okay. Maybe you schedule it for an hour, but if you schedule it for half an hour, you need to be really careful on your time management. Either way, no matter what you schedule the meeting length for, you have to watch the clock. Okay, so as you're coming near to the end of the time that you have scheduled with the client, if you realize you've got a lot more to talk about, and you just feel like you really got to keep this interview going, well, you go and you ask for more time. You don't just take it, okay? So if you're going to run out, ask for more time. You might not get it, all right? So keep that in mind. But no matter what, do not run over time without asking. So you've got a 30-minute meeting from 2 to 2:30. Let's say your client showed up late at at 2:10, well, you only have 20 minutes. Just because they showed up late doesn't mean you get to go to 2:40, okay? You've got to get done on time. You can ask for more time though, okay? And if you get it, great, you can go longer. But you always need to ask. Running over and then apologizing is not the thing to do. The other person is going to not feel respected, not to be valued by you if you don't abide by the time limits that you set for the meeting. All right, it's your responsibility. You can't expect that they'll end the meeting. It's your job, okay? Now, part 8 is a bit more detailed, and it's about getting detail. All right, so the idea here is to encourage low-level detail. You don't want generalities from the client. You want as much specific information as possible. You really want, oh, I got, no. I mean, you want to really get at what it is that their issue is. You want to get at all the details. You're trying to figure out everything that they need. And the more specific they can be, the better that you will be able to design a good solution for them. And so how are you going to do this? So one of the things that you do is to encourage it. You say things like, after they tell you something with a lot of detail, give them positive reinforcement. That was great. That's exactly what we need to know. In other words, people respond to praise. So as the client learns to talk to you, learns that, oh, you are interested in the fact that that it takes 30 minutes for this normal process to run, and that's too long. It needs to be faster. Whatever the details are. Well, you praise them for that. They really want to know all this stuff. So it's a self-reinforcing cycle. They'll start giving you what you show enthusiasm for, what you praise them for. Okay. Likewise, so if they're not giving you good low-level detail, so if the details are not low enough, and again, the reason you're trying to get low-level details is so that you can figure out what to build for them. Without the details, you're just going to be like, I hope this solves the problem. So if they're not low enough, you follow up with the 4 W's and the H. And the 4 W's are who, what, when, and where, and the H is how. So what's missing? You're like, well, wait a minute, what happened to the 5th W? The 5th W is why. And so you do not want to use why. Why? Well, why do you want that? Why do you need that? Why? You know what? It's going to be really hard for you to talk to a client and ask them why questions without it sounding like you questioning them. As in, you don't think what their answer was a good answer. It's going to come across as you think they're stupid, or you think that was a stupid thing to say. Why do you need to do that? You could try. You can try to fix your voice and inflections, but inevitably, why questions are going to set you up such that the client gets defensive. So they make the client defensive. In their brain, they're going to go, who are you to question me about why that's important or why we do it this way? Like, screw you. Okay, so don't ask why. Transform it into who uses things or who uses it, what is involved, when, where. You can almost take all of your why questions and turn them into hows. So why is that important? In what ways is that important? Or why does it need to be done in 10 seconds instead of, what is the benefit of it being done in 10 seconds? You can transform almost any of your whys into these other questions, which get, there are different ways of getting at things, time, people, other stuff, mechanisms. It will be much more useful, and the client won't actually get defensive on you. I saw another resource that talks about, the idea being to get to low level is, they say it's the 5 whys. So the client says something, and then you keep drilling at them with why this and why that, and then why this and then why that. I mean, I'm sorry. Like, the motivation there is a good one, which is drill down, try to get to those low-level details. But don't do it with a whole bunch of why questions. Follow up with the 4 W's and the H, okay? It makes a big difference. I can't explain it other than that, but give it a try. You could try it in all sorts of things. Basically, eliminate asking people why, and you'll probably people will be a lot less defensive, and they'll actually be more willing to answer you. All right, 9th part. We need one of the people in the room, or you could even have a couple people if you wanted, but really, it's not that hard. So one of the note takers, so again, I want everyone to be taking notes. If you had a large enough team, maybe you could dedicate a single person to your goal is to do this, but I actually think it's an easy enough thing to do that everyone should be taking notes. So one note taker also needs the job of checking off questions to make sure all are covered. And so you're going to have a whole bunch of things that you want to know, and you will have figured out a whole list of these things prior to the interview, because you and the team meets and goes, well, what is it that we need to know? Based upon what we know so far about what the client has, why they've contacted us, or what sort of issue is at hand, what are some of the questions that we're going to have? And you're going to brainstorm, you're going to come up with all these questions that you really think, yeah, we need these sorts of things. And there might even be standard things that once you have more experience, you're like, we always need to ask this. We always need to ask about, does it need to be a mobile app? Or is it okay if it's just a web-based app? Or, oh, wait a second, it needs to be a desktop app? You might always need to ask about, what browsers does it have to work on? Because, your Mozilla versus your whatever Microsoft calls their browser today versus Chrome, so forth and so on. They all, while they're supposed to implement standards, they all do it in slightly different ways. And so maybe it could make your life a lot easier if you're like the client's like, it only needs to work with Chrome. That's the only browser we support internally for our company, so you don't need to worry about compatibility with other browsers. You should be like, that's great. Because otherwise you need to worry about potential compatibility problems across the different browsers. So these are sorts of questions you might have a whole standard set of them. But again, the idea is not that an interviewer is going to come in and ask question after question after question after question. Again, you could do that with a survey. It's through the course of the conversation that the questions will get covered, And this is what this person's job is. It's like, oh, I just heard they only need Chrome. Check. We don't need to specifically ask that question because it came up in the conversation. All right. When you're done, don't forget to say thank you. Okay? Thank them for their time. Tell them what you're next going to meet, when you're going to follow up with them, so forth, and what the next steps are. But thanking them for their time, thanking them for having that conversation, this interview is really important. All right. Now, the last one's a big one. And we say it's part of the interview, even though you're done with the client at this stage. So you've said goodbye to them. But immediately following the meeting, so don't delay. You as a team are going to need to schedule the time for the team to work so that you're like, we're going to do the interview and then we're going to have this follow-up session. Okay? So immediately following the meeting, you're going to go as a group, to some other room. And I put it in quotes because we're doing everything remotely. You're going to go start up another Zoom meeting, or you're going to say goodbye to the client and make sure that they're really out of the Zoom meeting or whatever meeting space that you're in to continue working. And from then, each person on the team, and this includes the interviewer. The interviewer will probably have to work a bit more from memory because they don't have notes. Creates what we call our user stories. Or you could, if you user issues, customer issues, whatever you are, they can be anything that you think is important coming out of that meeting. Something that tells us about the problem, tells us about what we're going to have to do to solve this problem, that capture the client's problem. Okay, now it's important that each person do this. So I say as a group, but because you want to all get it done at the same time, and you will follow this up. We'll start doing it, but at the time that you start writing things down, so each person do their own stories. Okay, why is this? Again, this is because it's going to capture differences. If you all sit there and talk and try to, oh, I think about this, will the other people agree that this is an important thing? It's going to take a long time. And then two, if you put it out there, some sort of statement that's capturing this need of the client, other people hear, that's not exactly what I thought, but you know what? I don't want to fight. I don't want to argue, so I'm just going to let it go. No. So everyone's going to understand what the client said in a different manner. So we all need to write it down so that we can capture these differences. Okay. Now, what you write down, how are you going to write these so-called user stories? You're going to do the following. Okay. You're going to write them as full sentences. Now, not all interviews are designed to create user stories and things like that. You might be interviewing customers about problems they have with a service, and so you're trying to just capture all the complaints. Those aren't user stories. And as well, in this interview, you might have all sorts of things that the customer complains about. That's great. Write those down as well. All right. There's a bit too much emphasis, in my opinion, in the world of Agile and Scrum on everything being a user story. Not everything is. There are a lot of things that are necessary to know that the client has told us. Not all of them need to actually be what we will call a user story, but there's still something that we need to care about and we probably need to consider and put into the product in some way, shape, or form. So write it down, write a sentence basically. But so don't feel constrained. The big thing is to write this down, all right? And the idea is, you basically, it's one per card or sticky note. Now I know you're working remotely this term. I recommend that you actually go and you do this exercise in Miro. We'll have an account for students to use. Go in there and you can pull open a Miro board and everyone can start dragging and creating stickies and just typing on them. And then they can fill up the whole space with their stickies just like you would in a normal meeting room. And so in a normal meeting room, we'd tear off a whole bunch of sticky notes, and each person would be writing down these sentences on a sticky note and slapping them down into a pile. All right, but online you could do this with Miro working remotely, so you would all be in the same Zoom setup or Teams or something, sharing a screen, or just willing that you're in the Miro and you would see this. Now, a good format, if you are going to write it as a traditional user story, and I'll say this, again, I don't feel that all your user stories need to fit into this format, or all the things you need to write down need to be a user story. You're trying to capture what the client told you. But a good format to follow, and it helps a lot of people to follow this format, which is as a, and then we fill in type of user. So it could be as a user, or it could be as an administrator, or as a construction worker, or whatever it is. So it's who, it's the type of person. And we could certainly, and you can imagine coming out of the interviewer saying, well, I know that our staff need this and our outside contractors need this from the application. Those are two different types of users, okay? I want, and it's usually I want to, but I want some goal. So I want to do something. And this is actually the most important part of this probably, so this is the reasoning. Why is it that we're trying to do this? This allows us to organize our stories so that similar reasons we are all able to capture them, and also that we as a team know what the motivation is for, oh, I want to be able to delete this thing. Okay, well, why is it? Well, there's got to be a reason. So remember the so that. But you're trying to capture these sorts of things. It's a good format to follow. You don't have to follow that format. Definitely give it a try, though. So if you can do this format, do it. If you're like, I don't know how to put it in that format, don't, but still capture it. Okay. A reminder to, in all cases, you should be carefully maintaining your notes. Don't toss them out. Don't throw them out. You're going to need to turn them in anyway. But the real thing is, even after you do this process, you might still be, I want to come back and want to refer to what was it that they said, or maybe there was something that we missed. I actually think it's really good to use notebooks. Most of you would be using laptops. Save the file that you do. Don't trash it. All right. So you've gone and done this. That's great. So each person is doing this, and they have a big pile of material that they've written. You know, might be 10 items, might be more, might be less, but it's everything that you think was important to capture from this. And then, okay, so then with Stickies, so I'll just say that you've used a bunch of sticky notes, either virtual ones in Miro or real ones in person. Then the team removes duplicates. So this is a case where you're like, oh yeah, that's absolutely the same thing and it's said the same way, just remove the duplicates. And the team also rewrites the stories or whatever you have on the stickies till you have one set that everyone agrees on. And these would be the things that you think, wow, this captures that interview with the client. This captures everything that we can understand about what is the behavior of the software, what are basically the requirements. This is a requirement. We would traditionally call this requirements gathering, but what is it that we need to know? But really, it's driven by thinking about the user stories. In general, it's going to be what is the behavior of the software that we need to actually do? And it's this behavior that we believe will be working to solve the client's problem. All right. Very good.